What is happening? Welcome to another Pitcherless live stream. This one is a podcast, of course, for the On the Corner podcast. And I'm butchering this opener, but who cares? Because Kyle Bland is going to save this podcast. Kyle, it is so good to see you, the director of analytics here at Pitcherless.
Hello. Happy to be here.
Hi.
Happy to be representing the numbers side of our mock draft.
This is the quant of Pitcherlist. No, it's this is actually pretty awesome because what we were doing, of course, we're going through our Pitcherlist mock draft that we did with everyone inside of our podcast network, and Kyle said, "Look, I have our 2025 PLV projections, and I want to use them and showcase how good these are that we can draft a team and really show, display that like we have it already made and done, and it's great." And I'm butchering this once again. I can't talk. I'm just so excited, guys. These are PLV projections that you're going to get with PL Pro, and they are V1 is already out. In addition, they will be inside of our fantasy manager that we are putting out for 2025 as well for PL Pro users. So this was really a test for us to see, like, all right, we're doing this okay. And anyone that used the daily streamers for PL Bot this year will know that it was absurdly good. It beat me at my streaming picks throughout the year. And that's including times where we knew to fix it of, hey, we know this guy isn't going to get playing time as he returns from the IL, those kind of things. And still with that hand behind its back, it nearly got 100 streaming wins, which I've only done once over the years. So Kyle, tell us more just about how do you utilize the projections that you created to draft your team?
Yeah, so one of the things a little different than the kind of daily projections that you were talking about is this is, of course, season long. We're not going into it with kind of that granularity. I don't know who the exact lineups they're facing are. I have a good
Right.
idea. I don't even know who. I mean, we're so early. I don't even know what teams some of these guys are on, much less who they're going to be playing against. But I have a good enough idea. I can set a baseline, and then I use our PLV stats. So PLV proper, the pitcher model, and then in addition to all of its individual outcomes, so the things that make it PLV, the swinging strike likelihood, the batted ball suppression measures, all that good stuff, all gets folded in with other stats like a pitcher's results, like their strikeout rate, walk rate, in addition to kind of underlying like the ex-woba they allowed, that kind of thing, to all come in together to make a projection system that gives us a nice, novel, unique idea of who these pitchers are. And then we do the same thing again with the hitters using our POV suite of hitter stats. So that's things like their swing aggression, their contact ability, their decision value, the power value, and then all of that gets folded into our kind of holistic process plus measure. And so that provides a good idea of who this batter is once they're in the box, given the pitches that they faced. And then I also do some analysis, some regressions for stolen bases and figuring out, okay, given how often they're on base, how often did they steal last year, how often does their team steal, that kind of thing. I can predict how likely they are to steal and then how successful they are when they do steal. And so that'll give us our nice, like, traditional 5-category hitter projections for the season.
There you go. And what's really fun about it for me is, you guys might know this, I pretty much use them for this season for hitters. I was just like, all right. I mean, I'm obviously going to get the final takes of Scott Chu involved, but I pretty much used PL Bot with our live draft assistant this year. Gave me guys like Anthony Santander in pretty much every league and Salvador Perez. It's pretty dang good, and you're going to see from this mock draft, guys, that it knows what it's doing. It's also so interesting because every projection model that I've seen and utilized, from Steamer to BATX to I know there are many others. I mean, ATC is really just an aggregate, but my point is, this is the first one that really pushes an aggressive one out that is rooted in pitch modeling and the pitches thrown and the skills involved more so than just the results. Obviously, BATX does involve StatCast data. That's not to say that that doesn't at all, but this does it into another degree that just inherently makes sense. And to see it not spit out ridiculous things, actually be like, oh yeah, I get it, and following it through that the entire season. I was really excited for V2. This year is really like our second version of PLV, and it's refined. If you got a moment, of course, please, you obviously have a moment, but please take a moment and tell us really the changes that you've made on PLV and these projections as different from last year.
Yeah, so some of the big ones is now we kind of have a larger sample of the sweeper. Is the trendy
Yeah.
pitch in 2023. Everyone threw it, and so now we're starting to see that hitters are actually starting to be pretty successful against it. It's definitely not a strikeout pitch or a pitch to get whiffs. It's actually more of a batted ball suppressor pitch, and so that's starting to come through more in the data, and so we have a better idea of who kind of sweeper heavier, super forward pitchers are, and so that really helps with formulating these PLV projections, because in the past, especially going into last year, PLV loved sweepers because it was only guys like Shohei was like the big sweeper guy, and if your
Right.
comp is basically Shohei's pitch, it's going to look really good.
Yeah.
But now we have a much broader depth of pitches to choose from, so I'm always super geeked up to get another season's worth of data. Like I
Oh
just
yeah.
never have enough. But yeah, and then things just like fine tuning, tweaking my modeling process, pulling some more levers behind the scenes. It was great at first pitch, listening to Max Bay talk through his process, or not his
Ha.
his process about pitching plus,
Yeah.
and just get an idea. Like there's some things that he's doing that we implemented from the start, which is really cool to hear. There are some other like really clever ideas that he has as far as forming, like utilizing count and utilizing batted ball outcomes that I'm looking into, maybe folding in this offseason that'll give us even better predictive power.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I've been very proud of what PLV does. I think it's a
Oh
very
yeah.
good high level metric. Later on this off season, we're going to have our own stuff and location components, and you better believe that I'm going to be using those to also inform these projections. We'll have a much better idea of who's allowing hard contact because they just miss middle, or who can
Right.
really dot the corners and not walk guys. And then on the flip side, like who's just got that wipeout stuff, and who's like got a K rate that's way higher than you would think just by looking at the broader holistic idea of what their pitches are. So all that good stuff. And then on the hitter side, definitely new this year is folding in kind of the complete valued hitter stats. So decisions, contact, power, and then process. That was all a mid-season update for us. It's going to be on the site, on the player pages, readily accessible going into next season. So that's really exciting. But that's what fuels a lot of kind of the hitter in the box components of the hitter projection. So that's pretty new to this year as well, which is really exciting for me.
Oh man, it is so exciting. And yeah, right. You can find Process Plus in for PL11 that is launching in February and for next season, really, on the player pages. But to get the actual real big picture of the rolling charts and leaderboards for it all, that's all behind, of course, PL Pro, and all of our tools inside the dashboard that we'll be releasing as well. But I mean, guys, I've sent so many DMs to Kyle about my excitement at a 3-0 changeup or a 3-0 slider because we finally get more data for a 3-0 count that isn't a fastball. I can't express to you just how starved we are for these things. And I'm really excited also for sweepers to be fixed because, yeah, if you've noticed on our site, like Hitlock is super unfriendly to sweepers or actually favorable to sweepers, or the PLV is much higher, but right, it's comparing to Otani's, and a different class of sweeper now is going to be in the data and fine tune that a touch. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through this draft now and really talk about from the scope of really why the projection is liking this, why really rating kind of the picks as we go and seeing if it aligns with us here. And you chose pick number 1, Kyle. I'm going to assume this is because what you told me beforehand was that you were just finishing up the projections right as the draft started, maybe like 2 picks in or something. You were applying it. So did you take 1 knowing it would be Shohei Ohtani? Because duh. And then maybe by the time you got to your next pick, the projections would be done.
Yeah, it was very much going into it. Like,
Knew
I
it.
just don't have enough time to get this ready by the time I draft first. So I know Shohei after a 50-50 season is going to be number 1. And I mean, yeah, everything backs that up. There's a little bit, of course, since the projections came out, I actually have him a slight second behind Judge, and some of that
No.
is I'm a little hesitant about his shoulder. I think that
Yeah.
the news came out after this draft started that that shoulder was actually a little bit
Right. This
worse than we
wasn't.
all expected.
We did this draft. That's a really good point of
It's like
noting
right
that we
after the
started this
World
draft. I think
Series.
like October 10th, something
Yeah,
along those lines. So no World Series yet,
yeah.
and Otani was totally fine.
So that was tough. I mean, like, I still Shohei. Like, he's still number two. So, like, that's fine. But, like, at the
Mhm.
time, definitely number one with a bullet, 50-50 power, speed combo with the underlying metrics to back it up. He had the second best power plus by us in all of baseball, only behind Judge. He has a slightly aggressive approach, which is going to be something I'm going to talk about a lot this podcast, just
Mm.
because if you're in an average league, you want a guy who is a little aggressive as long as he can make contact, because what that'll do is that'll allow him more opportunities to get hits to use. If he has a plus average, that'll benefit your team even
Right.
more
In
if he's
volume. Yeah.
swinging more often. And especially for a player like Shohei, it allows his power to get into the game more often.
Sure.
Like, I want him taking hacks, because if Shohei mishits it, it could be a double. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe it's not a moonshot homer, but it'll be a double. And then one of the things in this modeling process is intent is one of the strongest signals for future stolen base performance.
Hmm.
And showing the wheels to succeed at all of those stolen bases, but also the intent to take those stolen bases when they're given to you in a Dodgers lineup that was pretty stolen base averse was pretty impressive. So, like,
Yeah.
controlling for his context. So that was very easy. Killer power, killer stolen base prowess. Dodgers lineup that's still just going to be, even if they re-sign Teoscar or not, or whatever free agency fine they get, it's still going to be loaded at the top where he is. And so, like,
Absolutely.
easy number one pick.
Definitely. So round two, you go against the pitcher list Grain. You decide to get Zach Wheeler before the turn of the third round. And he should be right there, 3, 4, 5, whatever you want to do with Zach Wheeler. Totally understand. Why is it Zach Wheeler as opposed to Garrett Crochet, Gordon Burns, and why going for a starter at this point?
Yeah, so he was SP3 off the board after a Scooble and Skeens, and that's free money to me. Like, I have him as my SB1. Well, I have Blake Snell as the best per inning pitcher right now.
Right.
So
So
it's
keep in mind,
Snell,
by the way, our
Wheeler, DeGrom.
projections. I should
Yep.
mention our projections at the moment. I think actually making this update like tomorrow or
Hmm.
something along those lines. But V1 is without playing time, so it's assuming the same number of plate appearances. I believe 600 for everyone,
Yep.
and then innings is at 180. I think.
160
Or
for starters and 60
160.
for relievers. Yep.
Understood. So Zach Wheeler, actually, you're saying at 160 relative to everyone else, even like Paul Skeens there, or and with DeGrom and Snell, Wheeler
Yep.
was 2 or 3. Is
Yeah.
that right?
It was number two. Yep. It was Snell,
Wow.
Wheeler. And so I was, I love Blake Snell. He's got crazy stuff, but, like, I just can't
Yeah.
pass up Zach Wheeler. And, like, I know once you do fold in playing time, I mean, Zach Wheeler's averaged 190 innings in the last 4 seasons and hasn't thrown under 150. Like, that is just elite track record of being
Yeah.
able to throw every fifth day. And it's not like, he's just schlepping along out there. He's had a sub 3 ERA and a 102 whip since 2021 over across 750 innings. Like, it's outrageous, with a
Yeah.
28%
He's
K rate, 5.6 walk rate. And, like, those all sound really good. He's consistently elite by PLV, so the underlines are great. And 4 and maybe 1/2 of his pitches all grade out really well by PLV. The four seam sinker, so he's got two really good fastballs to play with that he can attack both sides of the plate. Sweeper, curve, plus breakers, and then he also has a cutter that he doesn't use a ton, and that is
no.
about like 50th percentile.
Mhm.
But, like, it's still, like, for that to be his fifth pitch is just a bounty of riches.
Yeah. Hey, no, the command of Wheeler, four seamer sinker, just being 2 pitches in the zone constantly, and not just kind of meatballs down the pipe. That guys just can't tell the difference between. I mean, Wheeler is the example of hey, two fastballs that you don't know the difference between with good extension, this works. At 96 or so, it's just they can't deal with it. And then you also have those other three pitches, which aren't really, I never really consider them plus plus, but are certainly not the stars of this show. Four seamer, sinker are just the ones that eat guys alive. And Wheeler's always had like a 40% O swing on his sinker, one of the few guys in the majors that does this consistently because he knows how to get inside to right-handers. And everyone thinks it's the four seamer coming in, and they'll always swing at this. It's how he goes over 6 innings and starts consistently. There's no one like him really in the majors at the moment.
No, not at all. And I'm loading it up on our pitcher list apps, which you should absolutely get for pro subscribers. But like his sinker plot is just, it's one of my favorites for handednesses because he just attacks inside, both sides, both handednesses, same pitch, but just hammers the front door, like just definitely jams those right-handers. That can't be fun. Like I'm looking at this red, and it's red where it says hitter stands here on my chart, so I love that.
Right.
So,
remember the stick figures you had initially. Those are not.
Yeah,
we got rid of those. I axed that. I was like, okay, this is
it's too clunky.
One day you should probably tweet that out. Like, hey guys, do you think I should bring this back? But
my paint by numbers stick figures on those charts. But I just love it's. I am generally not a fan of sinkers, but like this is a truly elite pitch, like across the board. Like he performs extremely well with it. He weaponizes it as much as he should. I mean, it's got 18 inches of arm side break at 95 and 7.2 feet of extension.
Yes.
Like it's outrageous. Like it is a cheat code of a pitch. And I mean, and that's one of his two great fastballs. And then those other pitches I talked about, they're like, I mean, we could do this whole podcast.
Yeah, we really could.
Talking about Zach Wheeler, but I'm going to leave it there. Dude's great. Dude pitches a lot. Easy SP1 for me this year.
Oh, that's so good. And by the way, we have actually PLV Location Plus inside of those pitch type charts right now inside the PL Pro apps. And also you can get PLV stuff inside of the live one as well.
Yep.
So we technically have it in beta for PL Pro users, and we hope to share more about that later. Going to your third round pick here for, you have Ohtani, you have Wheeler, and come back around is actually something more aggressive that I would think a lot of projection systems might shy away from because you don't have track record. You have to really lean in heavily on this. And I would imagine that a lot of projection systems, unless you have like the greatest season ever in your first year, might be hesitant to buy in on a successful rookie campaign. However, here you are, Jackson Merrill pairing up with Zach Wheeler. And was this a projection pick? Was this a you pick? Was it, if it was you, was it the projections backing it up later?
Yeah, so this is my last me pick, and it's with the projections backing it up after the fact. Okay, because the dude's a stud. Like he on my money, he's the NL Rookie of the Year, but 5 wins, 130 WRC plus. He finished the season with a 140 process plus by us, which is just a tremendous number. Yeah, that's actually better, that's why I looked at him. That's why I was so fascinated. Just for reference, 5 hitters finished with a 140. Judge, Soto, Ohtani, Yordan Alvarez, Vlad Guerrero Jr.
And just so everyone's clear, what Process Plus does is through PLV, we assess every pitch that they see and say, okay, great. Are they making good decisions based on the context of that pitch and where it's located and all the attributes of it? Are they swinging at the pitches that they can hit and then not swinging at the ones that they can't? It's not just in zone, out zone. You also have contact, which is when they do swing, are they making contact when they should, or are they not? And then once contact is made, we have Power Plus, which is saying, okay, great. How far does it go? How hard does it hit when contact is made? And you take all 3 of those together and you make this lovely number of Process Plus that says, great. It doesn't matter if you necessarily make bad decisions. If you're making a ton of contact, getting tons of power, we don't really care. But it really just takes it all and says, is this going to be a productive player? Think of Process Plus as WRC Plus, but instead of the results that WRC Plus is, Process Plus is the skills version of it. It makes all the sense in the world. And to hear that Jackson Merrill is among, what was it, Alvarez and Otani and Judge and Soto? Is that it?
Soto and Guerrero, Vlad Jr. had a
Vlad
really good
Guerrero,
season.
Vlad Guerrero was a 140.
He
Oh,
had a bounce back year. I was,
I
you
mean,
know,
I didn't.
he
I saw him go in the second round in the beginning of it, and I went, huh?
yeah,
And
no, it's
huh,
legit. I don't know that I'd take him above maybe Freddie, but like
yeah,
it's 1-2 for sure
that's
at first base.
interesting.
The two of them, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
man,
No,
I'm
he
gonna
had
be
a
likely
sneaky good
circling
season.
him in the middle of the second round, hopefully,
Yeah,
then as a target because first baseman does fall off after like the initial 5. I want to say Bryce Harper
yeah.
and Pete Alonso and Matt Olson. I'd even put Pete Alonso lower because I think he's gonna fall off, but that's just me. Jackson Merrill
His
being 140 process plus, I have no doubt that the projections certainly favored him here. Is there anything else
and
you want
one
to add
more
about
thing.
Merrill? I mean, is it going to stick around
Yeah,
for next year, you think?
I think it'll stick around. I think he's. I mean, he was a rookie and he did all that. So I
Yeah,
think, and he had. It's not like it was a flash in the pan either. Like he had almost 600 plate appearances. So he
sure.
established himself. He was able to like pitchers adapted to him. He adapted back. Like I said, he finished so strong at the end of the year. And this is one of my favorite little blurbs that I saw kind of doing research before the projections were fully baked and I could use them. He had a 99th percentile ideal plate appearance rate. So that's
Ah,
combining barrels, solid, and flares and burners per plate appearance. So like your
hmm,
really good batted ball quality per plate appearance, he was 99th percentile. Like the
that's
dude
amazing.
just sprays hits basically. Like no cheapies. And so I like that's such a good floor. That's one of his strengths was I believe in his hit tool from the get go, and then he can
Yeah,
also fold in mid 20s pop and upper teens stolen bases. And one of the things that, especially if you're using projections that value that holistically value all stats, you'll see these like 5 tool guys can kind of start to trickle up your rankings because it
mm,
really does help you both in terms of you don't have a lot of holes and it allows you to be more versatile later on and then to take those guys who may be dropping because they don't have average or they don't have power but steal a bunch of bases, and so like the versatility you get from them in addition to the overall value is it's one of my favorite things to go for.
yeah. And I want to mention also with Merrill when he first came out, the first 3 months, you can really see in the rolling chart for Process Plus how he was more contact focused. He was like, okay, I'm in the majors, and instead of trying to be the all-star slugger, I'm gonna focus more on just making contact and like putting the ball in play and not really
Mhm.
and not pushing myself. And then I think it's a great transition to see that power really come starting in July.
It's
And
like
the
he
contact
sold
did go
out.
down,
Yeah,
but it's because I think it's by a decision. There is something to be said about the right balance of contact and power. If
he's
you
a
are
very aggressive hitter too. Like he was
right,
almost 10% higher swing likelihood, which is very
mm,
very high.
so he's understanding what he can do and also when to swing his A swing as much as he can.
Mhm.
And that certainly took off in the second half as he really started to get more comfortable with it, which is even more encouraging to me. And it's not like he was slouching before he hit that 140 peak, 145,
No,
whatever
he
he
was
ended
always a
the
plus
in the season.
hitter. Yeah.
Right. It was 120 process plus for the first 3 months or so, falling as low as say 110 before he really exploded. That 110 was about August 1st, and then bam, he just went through the roof with a ton of power. And then the contact came back to match earlier in the
Mhm.
season, and the decisions actually kind of came with it. So aggressive, but rightly so. By the
Yep.
end, too. Really cool stuff with Jackson Merrill. We're going to talk about the rest of your draft here as we get to full on projections taken over. The machines have arrived. We'll start with round 4 after this break. So we're back. We have Kyle Bland, of course, the director of analytics here at Pitcher List, creator of our PLV projections. And we're talking about this mock draft, which, by the way, there are 2 Otanis. So even though it was Otani first overall, that doesn't even include what he's going to do as a pitcher potentially next year. And
Good
4th
point.
round free agent, Teoscar Hernandez. What did the projections have to say here?
I mean, the projections really like him. Like he's the ideal power bat kind of guy. Like you're a cleanup hitter. Like when you think of a cleanup hitter, it's Teoscar Hernandez.
Mm,
Consistently a 130 WRC plus bet, minus he had that he had that down year in Seattle, but before that he was really good. This year with the Dodgers, he rebounded right back to that level, and so seeing that kind of thing always makes me feel more confident that okay, it was just a blip, that he can get back to it. Like I said, prototype cleanup hitter. He's got uh, just power for days, and he makes good decisions when to get it. He has a little bit of swing and miss to his game, but not really an issue when you hit the ball as hard as he does, and he buys himself a little bit of breathing room by making those good swing decisions. And then another thing, he had an elite barrel rate. So I keep bringing up just power with him. He had a 14.2% barrel rate, which was 95th percentile. The dude hits tanks, and that was an easy pick. He's outfield eligible. I have him not as a Dodger in the projections. I have to do kind of a more generic playing
just
time,
an average team essentially.
Like run environment for him, but he still fared out well by that. And then folding in, I think the scuttlebutt is the Dodgers might be the favorites to re-sign him. That if he can get back in there with like those three hitters in front of him and Shohei, Mookie, Freddie, like that's RBI opportunities for days. And especially he's a guy who, again, 3 for 3 now. He's an aggressive hitter. He swings more often than you'd expect. His is a little worrisome just because of the contact concerns, but now we're starting to get, everyone has warts. There's no first round picks here in the end of the fourth, but I really like what he brings to the table. I really like and by extension the POV projections. They really like kind of what he shows, the skills he brings, especially to kind of the rest of my team, to bring that power back to kind of help with the Merrill average pick.
Yeah, Teoscar Hernandez there. And I mean, you have like this run of home run bats. You have Anthony Santander later in the fifth. You have Riley Green as well. Mike Trout for the ceiling of that. James Wood is actually coming back on the other side of it. But previously in this, we had Kyle Schwarber and Brent Rooker. And I kind of think that Rooker, Schwarber, Teoscar, Santander are going to be kind of attached to each other. Except for one guy, you're laughing so much. There's someone who's not involved here. Maybe Santander. I don't know.
No, I love Brent Rooker so much. There's a reason he's the poster boy of the POV projections. He's the image. He's the center image. I'm such a huge fan, but he's DH only, at least to start the year.
Oh,
and so
interesting.
Going Shohei 1-1 meant I can't get Rooker, but like,
well, you can. We have Rooker, 2 util spots, but still, yeah.
And I mean, I thought good on Hacks and Jacks for getting him there. I was, would think he would make it to the end of the fourth, but that's not my pick. Maybe one of my favorites though, Brent Rooker to the moon this year. But
I think honestly, Billy Freeman, Foolish Baseball, really made that happen when he made that Brent Rooker joke. He saw the prophecy. Renders of the Las Vegas Athletic Stadium showcasing a 300+ average for Brent Rooker. Anyway, going to the fifth round, it's CJ Abrams. And I do want to ask at this point, one of the major talking points about drafts and how versus projections is position scarcity, and how we say, look, like, I just don't want to leave the first 5 rounds without a second baseman or a first baseman or whatever. And I'm looking at your team at the moment, and it's Ohtani, it's Merrill, it's Hernandez, it's CJ Abrams, and no second baseman, no first baseman. Is that something that is being considered as you make these picks? Is that something that, that you want to maybe put your thumb on the scale on, or were you just like, no, we're going to just let this go?
So Abrams was one that I put a little bit of thumb on the scale, just because, like, if the value's all outfielders, it's like I was just talking about with Brent Rooker, of like the value's Brent Rooker, but like I have a DH. I can't pick another DH because then I'm not getting the benefit out of them, kind of thing. Same thing with the like opportunity cost of picking maybe a slightly less talented shortstop outweighs the outfielders that were on the board there. And so I moved up. I was bummed. I got sniped by This Week in Fantasy with Willy Adames. I would have loved that pick, but he got picked right before me. But CJ Abrams, great consolation prize. He's kind of a pure speed but sneaky pop guy. if you followed me on Twitter or Nick on Twitter, you saw he's the poster boy. He was the subject of that Process Plus breakdown
Yeah.
video that goes through the swing and is like, it's this decision, it's X decision value, Y contact value, Z power, and all that adds up to this single process value for that one swing. And it was like a fastball at his shoulders that he somehow, with two
Oh yeah, I
strikes, that he
remember this.
somehow just tanked over the wall.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
yeah.
Who
But like,
threw
so
that
he's
pitch?
the poster boy
I
for
was
that.
so upset because it was against a pitcher I liked, I think. Maybe not.
Oh yeah, I forget. And I think he was coming back, like he was like a rehab start, like a first start back. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
of course, that's the home run he gives up. Was like
Right.
this like great, like very well executed
Yeah.
pitch, but Abrams just got a hold of it. But yeah, so he's got that in his bag. I wouldn't count on him to be, like a mid-20s home run guy, but I think that he can absolutely be like upper teens, but you're not drafting him for the power. You're drafting him because he has stolen base prowess. The
Right.
dude sold 31 last year, 47 the year before. Like they talked about, intent is the biggest indicator of future stolen base success. And in addition to just the wheels he has on the base, he's got plus contact and plus power values by our POV metrics, and is also another very aggressive hitter. So if you're very aggressive, you can make contact and you can hit the ball for a little bit of pop. That's a really helpful profile, especially when, if you're getting on first, you're taking second.
Right.
And one of the things that I fold in to this is lineup estimates. So you have different guys likely to steal if they're at the top of the lineup versus if they're the cleanup hitter. Runs, you get more runs at lead off than you do further down the lineup, that kind of thing. And so he's a guy, it's a Nationals team that might not be that great, but he's going to lead off for them. He's going to have a lot of opportunities to take second base. Like, I really believe in this profile. And especially, like, I'm happy to have him as my shortstop at this point in the draft.
Right. It's also off of Hayden Birdsong, by the way. All of you guys listening right now, but it was off of Hayden Birdsong. I just watched it again. Oh my gosh. It is the highest home run of the. It's so stupid. It's
It's
96
amazing,
up
but
in a way.
it's
And
perfect. Like, that's why Process Plus is such a cool stat to
yeah,
me, because it is just like, it tells you like that was a really good pitch. And so like this is the kind of thing of like, you can credit the pitcher for making a good pitch, and that's what PLV does. But now you can demerit the hitter for swinging at that. So it was a bad decision value to try and go and get that heater, but it was a very impressive just to even get the bat on it. And then it was extremely impressive to not just get the bat on it, but to put it in the outfield bleachers. And so all of that gets folded into one. And that's kind of the telling point of CJ Abrams: questionable decision value, solid contact, solid power, and then you fold in the stolen base. It's great.
right. So we're going to move on to the 6th round. It's Jordan Westberg, who I believe is more than just third base eligible. It could be second base, and that's.
Yep.
I imagine this is you also being like, okay, I know Peelbot likes this, but it's not saying it's the best player available. But I feel like this should be the guy I need to go for now.
Yeah, I think that's going to be kind of one of the refrains from this draft season, is just how both top heavy and extremely shallow second base is.
Yeah.
Of like, once you get past your Ketel Martes, which I think you grabbed.
Oh, I was
Very
like, I do not
nice.
want to deal with this. Nope.
Yeah,
Like the first thing I did is I opened up every single position and just like looked at results from this past year. I was like, it's only Ketel Marte and
yeah.
Mookie Betts and Altuve and Albies, and it's like, okay.
Yeah. And I mean, depending on how, like, if you have like a 20 games started threshold, like Mookie's not second eligible. So that's like the
Oh
number
man.
one second baseman got. So like it can be, make sure you know your settings, but it's like it gets real dark real
Yeah.
fast. And I like Westberg as kind of a dark horse pick to be just a very capable bat at second base. POV projections like him a good bit. He's one of the things he's got is he's another one of those guys who is like a across the board process plus guy, which means to me is like he makes good decisions. So he adds value with his decisions. He adds value with his ability to make contact, and he adds value when he hits the ball with his power. Another thing really in his favor, the Orioles batted him second or fifth fairly often, which are
Oh yeah.
very lucrative spots in the lineup. Like second is probably the best possible outcome for run and RBI opportunities, and then fifth is a very good spot, especially behind an Orioles lineup that outside of Santander is more on base than pop. Your Rushman's a high average hitter, depending on who they're hitting cleanup. Cleanup could be like Cedric Mullins, maybe, or like if they call up Jackson Holiday, he's another guy who was like a hit tool maven, but isn't really known for his power. So there could be a lot of guys on base if Westberg's batting fifth, which is a great opportunity for him. And yeah, like I said, he's a kind of similar to Abrams before. He's a little bit of thumb on the scale for position scarcity, just because like it was a cliff to me for all of the second baseman after that. I think it's Luis Garcia Jr., who's very far down the projections. He's like kind of a one tool average
Yes.
guy, and they
Yep.
might not even hit him against both sides.
Oh
So
man.
yeah, so exactly. So this was a little bit of like the parachute pick at second base, but I'm really happy. Again, he's got really good underlying metrics. That Orioles lineup, uh, I have a lot of faith in. I think they're going to be really good, and I think they could be really dangerous, especially since it's a lot of young guys. There's a lot of avenues for them to get better as a unit, and that'll float all of their fantasy boats.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is a seal of approval for me, which I feel weird doing because it's PLV projections. And it's like, good job, projections. I agree with you. But this is still, I mean, whoever gets Westberg is the one who is able to wait longest for still a very quality second baseman who can get better.
Mhm.
He also dealt with injury and then came back and showed that he was still very much good once he returned. So it's really nice to see that. I see the gaps anytime with Process Plus. I believe it was injury, if not minors, but he didn't go to the minors, did he? No, he was there the entire year.
No, he was. I believe it was injury. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
just
yeah.
right, right
Guys,
back
I'm
where he
I'm the
started.
pitching guy, okay? But right with Westberg, it's like you want to see that the injury didn't last onward. You say like, cool, I come back and I'm good, and I showcase it by the end of the year. That's what he did. In your seventh round, you decided to go back to the well in pitching a pitcherless darling because his name is PL after all. That is Pablo Lopez. And I remember, shout out Carson Picard with us here at Pitcher List for you and Carson being so vocal with me about Pablo's fine. He's going to be fine in season. And what of course, he went on, I think, like a 234 ERA stretch to end the year, like his last 14
Yeah.
starts, something like that. You must be pretty happy with Pablo here. I imagine the projections are very favorable on the strikeout rate, the ERA, just overall. I would say the whip is probably the one that it doesn't love, but I am curious to hear the full take for Pablo.
Yeah, I mean, so actually, it's a pretty good whip measure just because he had a 5.3% walk rate last year.
Yeah.
Very nice. Like he's a good control pitcher, especially since he left Miami. It was 6% in 2023 with the Twins,
Mhm.
5.3% last year. Like he's really reined in kind of it's not even a walk issue, but like it's become definitely a big strength of his ability
Right.
to limit those free passes. And generally, I'm going to bet on the side of uh, the hit per nine BABIP luck regressing down, especially with a guy who this is a PLV darling. I mean, he's the ninth best PLV measure at a 5.36 across
Yeah.
all pitchers. Like
No, so he has a
it's
sweeper in
just a
there,
fan.
which is going to favor
Yeah.
still a little bit with some weight. And the four seamer, though, I want to say it was one of the highest swinging strike rates in baseball. I know that George Kirby was number one, but he is certainly up there with it and was really a driver, even though he didn't quite command it as well as we've seen in the past. The changeup also
Yeah.
disappeared at times for Pablo. And we know in the first 2 months of the year that the sweeper feel wasn't there until he essentially gripped it and ripped it and just kind of went as hard as he could on it. And all of a sudden it clicked again for him. It's great to see that from him. Utilize the sinkers correctly by trying to jam about 10% of the time, or really that means like 20, 25% against righties, which is how it should be. It's great. And Pablo's dope. He's going to get lots of volume again. I remember when we also worried that he was a health risk and wouldn't be doing it's like 3 straight seasons to have 160 innings. But after that first one, we're like,
108.
I don't know. He's just a staple there. He has an extension there. He's comfortable. He knows what he's doing, preparing every year. Yeah, Pablo's there. The only thing is the hit per 9 is going to be elevated, I think, still, because it is not a four-seamer that avoids being a strike constantly. Constantly just try not to have that walk, and it does mean that hit per 9 does stay higher than what you want to see is like under 7 for a true ace. For him to be like that one whip guy, it needs to be under 7. I don't really think we're going to get that, but I hope we do.
Yeah, I hope we do too. And it's also, he has the repertoire to be able to kind of dial off that four seamer. He threw it 41% last year with 20% sweepers, 20% change 10 curve. Like, I think he can. I mean, ideally, I'd love to see him do like what Sandy Alcantara used to do and basically just be 25% of each pitch. But
Yeah.
like, that'd be sick. But even still, he could dial a little bit off and throw more secondaries. I think it'll really benefit him, especially since his secondaries all break in the four different
Oh, man.
directions. Keep
Yeah.
hitters on their toes. Like that is something that I just find very aesthetically pleasing when I look at these pitch charts. But I think from a pitching standpoint, it also makes you much more versatile. And for him, when you tie into the fact that he's shown that he's got a plus ability to command in general, and he also has a plus ability for most of these pitch types in specific, that yeah, it was. I like wish I could go back to last year again, just because I traded for so many people selling Pablo Lopez, and it paid off so handsomely. Like that was definitely like my mid-season like flag planting, and I'm so glad that it paid off. It was so vindicating, both like personally and just like PLV was just trucking through. It was like, no,
Yeah.
he's not bad. He's still good.
And it
So I
worked.
was like,
And look,
all right,
I
double
normally
down.
say we don't do victory laps, but Kyle, you're allowed to have that victory lap. I'm here for
Yeah,
it. Here to support.
love it.
Also, you just reminded me that we're going to see Sandy Alcantara pitch again next year, and I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Oh, and I understand it more about the four seamer and sinker being strike pitches, and that just being so hard to deal with at that velocity. And it's gonna be so fun. What's also really fun is going through the rest of your picks, and we are not going quickly whatsoever here. We got to speed this up as we're going to the eighth round. We're going to talk about your 8th round pick after this break. So your 8th round pick is also a free agent like Teoscar Hernandez. It is going for third base. You got Westberg at second. You got CJ Abrams at short. You need a third baseman. And this does feel like one of the last ones. Chapman, Junior Caminero, Mark Vientos, Royce Lewis, Chisholm, and Riley, and Machado, Jose Ramirez. All those are off the board. But here's Alex Bregman at the end of the 8th round. Is this another one of you putting the thumb on the scale for position, or is this projections?
No, this was a projections measure that Bregman he's just a very solid hitter. He's always been, plus decisions was his calling card. I mean, even since he was drafted, and that's borne out across his entire career. He does that. He does a good job of making contact. He does a little bit of the Isaac Paredes thing where he's so good at contact that he can kind of sell out for those pull side home runs. And it works. I mean, it especially works in Houston with the Crawford boxes, but I think that is a skill set that can kind of transcend across ballparks. It might not, he might lose like 1 or 2 homers, but like for the most part, those are still probably going to turn into doubles anyway. So you're not losing out that much on like overall value. And I think a lot of these free agents, I think there can be a lot of hype about where they go. And so I think a lot of people are scared to pick them because like, oh, well, what will the team do? Where will he slot the lineup? And like don't get me wrong, lineup matters, ballpark matters, opposition matters, but less so. But like all of these things is like, well, if the guy can hit, he's going to hit high in the lineup. And it's better to hit high in like a medium or even bad lineup than it is to hit lower down in a good lineup. If he's at a bad ballpark, even if it's Seattle, and I actually on Blue Sky we were talking about Bregman and he might end up in Seattle specifically, and it's that, well, it might affect his contact a little bit, but even if it does, it's still half his games. So like I think that there are a lot of there's a lot of room to capitalize in these early drafts on free agents because I think uncertainty scares people, and I think they see they get spooked by, oh well, what if he goes to a terrible, like, what if he goes to the White Sox? Then what happens? Or what if he's hitting in Comerica? Then like all of his power is sapped. It's like it's not that bad. Thankfully, if they're free agents, they're probably not going to voluntarily go to the White Sox. So like you don't really need to worry about that. But yeah, I think Bregman is another one of those guys that does a lot of things really well. He'll be able to hit for damage at the top of the lineup. I like it a lot.
Nice. We're going to go to the 9th and 10th round here. It's two pitchers, Logan Webb and Spencer Schwellenbach. And I got to say, I love seeing your love for Spencer Schwellenbach. I certainly had to go to war with him. You actually went to war with me about my Blake Snell ranking. The OTC live podcast in First Pitch, Arizona. Look, I know this is the thing, is like, this is what projections miss, is that there are all these nuances about the human. That is just, you got to recognize that with Blake Snell, you likely are going to be an anxious manager. And you're going to say, no, I'm going to be disciplined. I know when it's not going well in May that I'm going to hold on tight and everything's going to be fine. You don't know in May. It happens every single year, sure, but maybe this is the year it doesn't. And that's going to creep through your head and you're going to be so anxious.
It's one of those things that, I mean, don't get me wrong, like we talked about before, POV performed well last year, but if things don't turn out, if a guy blows up and has a bad start, I'm like, oh, well, it was a good process to start him or draft him or trade for him or whatever. It's a good process. It's a good process. But then there are these guys where it's like, oh, well, my numbers say he's good. And also, if I watch Blake Snell on the days where he's shoving, it is a work of art.
Oh, yeah.
Like the dude, like, and so like there are a lot of guys like that. Like Cole Reagans was another one. I picked him up. When you went off, I picked him up in Dynasty.
We're talking
it's
Snell.
So good.
We're talking Cole Reagans and
Alcantara. I'm jumping all over the place.
Lopez.
Anyway, actually, speaking to two guys that actually fit that for me, Logan Webb, Spencer Schwellenbach, very, very different profiles. Absolutely. Logan Webb is he'll go 7 innings, pitch to contact, put everything in the dirt, and he'll have a good ERA, maybe not as great of a whip as you'd like because he's allowing so many hits. But like San Francisco's a great pitcher's park. I think that last year was a blip. I really believe in. Ironically, I think he has ground ball stuff. Like people think of stuff as like a strikeout only thing, but no, stuff is also very batted ball dependent or batted ball quality dependent. And his
stuff is
great.
more conducive to that than location. Location is actually more correlated to whiffs. Good location is higher whiffs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's the whole idea behind the Hava height adjusting. Yeah. That's where the ball ended up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love Logan Webb. I think you'll see my first 3 pitchers, Wheeler, Lopez, Webb, all guys who are going to throw. Are some of the best bets in baseball to get 180 to 200 innings, and like having that as a rock solid 3 stack was outrageous, and it afforded me from like a roster construction standpoint, but also POV projections love Spencer Schwellenbach. That this is the home run swing. This is all right. Like we saw, like he had such a good season last year. Now let's see what we can get with a full, can he did 120 last year. Can he get up to 160, 170? Like that would be sick. And if he can do it with the 20% K minus strikeout, K minus BB rate that he had last year, like I think this is a guy who it's like there's a lot of avenue. He's 24. The Braves are a smart org. Like the projections liked him, but I think outside of that, I think he has a ton of room to really rise this year.
Oh yeah. I mean, with Spencer Schwellenbach, it's about 167 innings. That's what Jason Collette sent me. He's worried about the workload stuff with them. So as far as just Atlanta is in a position to just say, cool, every 5 days now with Spencer Schwellenbach, hopefully he can hold on to it. I'm not as concerned as Jason about that workload. However, I do get it. It's not just the under 130 or so for Schwellenbach this past year. But really with him, it's about the 4-seamer getting pulled back more and being able to use the secondaries properly. The 4-seamer is thrown with a 72% strike rate and with a 41% ICR. That means the striker is favorable at 58%, which is a 90th percentile essentially. However, I think it did make him more susceptible to those bad moments where you had this amazing caper walk, but then using the fastball in those counts were actually the reason why the ERA went up days. 11% mistake rate on that fastball is not acceptable. You can't do that, right? And you're saying, what? How does he have that? It's a 96 mile per hour fastball because the shape of it is not great. It is 12.5 IVB. Oh boy.
And you can't pair that with a 10% middle location rate.
Yeah. Don't do that. Okay. Don't just throw it for the sake of throwing it there. Yes, a 4.6% walk rate, but this is the kind of thing. It's always the balance of pitching is figuring out, should I just throw a strike or like maybe not? Maybe I should nibble a little bit more. 3 pitches for Spencer Schwellenbach were over a 70% strike rate. Cutter, slider, four-seamer. I would so much rather have that than someone who has 3 pitches under a 60% strike rate, because that means you can dial it back. You can actually locate it better than average, which means to me that, oh yeah, this can get better. Throw fewer four-seamers over there, throw the cutter a little more specifically, the slider more specifically. And what's really nice is he has multiple swing strike rate pitches. A splitter was utilized against lefties. That had a 23% usage with a near 25% swing strike rates. Rare to see a 62% strike rate on a splitter. I'm endorsing one, guys, because it's not the only pitch he has. Okay, that's just think it as a change up to lefties. That's good. Okay, stop with your texts. And then against righties, he just threw everything he wanted to do with the slider. 15% swing strike rate there. 21% on the curveball. It's really fun. And it's a great scenario with Atlanta letting him roll. He's efficient because of this. KY Mice Walk loves him. I mean, I'm a huge Spencer Schwellenbach fan. And as you mentioned, there's room to grow. The perfect mold that you want for like a 10th round, 12th round pitcher is the one who has volume with win potential and has room to grow, right? Volume that you already like, that's beneficial, better than a Holly, really, or really a Toby, I should say. A Holly who has potential for more is what Schwellenbach is. And I'm a big fan of Mr. Crescendo for next year. As for Logan Webb, he was very strange because he just changed what he was doing. He didn't know. I don't know. Maybe he's experimenting a ton, where the changeup, it just got hit a ton harder. It was like a 31% ICR in 2023 and went well above 40. I want to say 46%, if I remember correctly, which is crazy. This is the pitch for Logan Webb. And yeah, that hurt him. And then he messed around with sweepers more and sinkers and four-seamers and then a cutter in there too. What is this? You're supposed to throw like 60 changeups in a game. And he stopped doing that. So I'm a little worried about Webb because I feel our perception of him is the guy with the changeup first and then hopefully something added. And the fact that Webb was searching for something else and it didn't really go that great means to me that there's something is wrong and we might be assuming too much about it. This is the kind of stuff that also I would think, correct me if I'm wrong, with PLV projections I'm actually curious how much it weighs those pitch mix changes and then says, okay, he might be a little bit different than we expect because I'm not really going to use the 2023 numbers when he has this different pitch that wasn't what it was, or he's just a different pitch mix kind of thing. How much do you take that into account?
I don't take like particular pitch mix changes in. I'll take it kind of at the holistic level of like, what does his repertoire do? Because that's generally going to be more stable and predictive year to year than trying to wish upon or like try and look into the crystal ball and see like, oh, well, he's going to add a cutter because he listens to
I'm not necessarily saying adding a cutter. I guess the first question would be like, how much does PLV projections utilize recency versus past seasons?
So across the board, most recent season is the most powerful predictor across all the stats, across all the underlying metrics. I also fold in the prior 2 seasons, and there's generally a drop off of last season's most important, 2 years ago second, and then 3 years ago third. Sometimes the second and third year are pretty close to equally predictive, but either way, it's still really helpful to get that broader, I was talking earlier before, I love more data, that it gives you a better picture of who this pitcher is. It also can kind of tell you the story of, I mentioned with Teoscar Hernandez, of 2 years ago was a blip, last year was really great, what do we do with that? Well, if we know that 3 years ago was also really great, it gives us more credence to believe last year that he was good last year. And kind of the flip side here with Logan Webb of like, he's been like 2023, 2022, he was legit great. Average 200 innings a season, right? Or just over a 3 ERA, 110 whip, which for a contact oriented pitcher is elite. So, like, it knows those things. It weighs like 2024 the most, but it's still like, well, he's still got that in his bag a little bit, or like he had that.
Yeah,
And I mean, even we've been talking a little doom and gloom about it, it feels like, but he's still at a sub 3.5 ERA. Like for
sure.
all of it, I mean, the problem with him is going to be that whip was over a 1-2, which is way high, and he's never going to be a good source of strikeout rate. He'll get you
Right.
strikeouts on a volume basis because he'll get you, he's got 7 innings to do it every game and 200 across the season. But per plate appearance, he doesn't just quite have that blow guys away stuff. So his strikeout rate will always be a little lacking. But like he was still an extremely usable pitcher. And I kind of alluded to it with Schwellenbach, but like how I personally think about this is he like buys you those moonshots that is like, this is a guy who will be good, who will be a rock for me, that like I can drop that pitcher down my lineup and take this guy with question marks if I need to. The midseason pickups, or like the reclamation project, the Pablo Lopez of last year, of like, okay, I have ratio stability. Let me take some chances here. And Logan Webb is a guy who not only will provide you really good ratio stability, but he's also shown that he can be kind of a top tier fantasy starter.
Sure. And moving on to pick 11, as we, of course, do not speed this up whatsoever, and this is on me. Jake Berger, and this is the darling of Scott Chu's First Pitch Arizona presentation of rolling charts provided by Kyle Bland, who saved the presentation with his laptop, if I remember that
Yeah.
correctly. But Jake Berger was the one that Scott Chu 20 million times, and it sticks with me forever. How he's talking about, we saw it in the rolling chart before he was traded. Before he was traded, he was fixing it. It was before the trade. Okay. But Jake Berger still doing his thing in Miami. And you're a believer again here in the 11th round.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Jake Berger is criminally underrated. I think that he's one of those guys who's got a great power tool. Like, goes without saying that he's got 30 homer potential in his bag every year, 29 last year, 34 the year before. And he split 2023 between the White Sox and the Marlins. Like, those are sad teams that like would sap someone's confidence, and he's still just hitting tanks. And it's, the lineup is going to depress his counting stats, his runs, his RBIs a little bit. But this is a guy who I'm just realizing right now has hit 250 exactly the last 3 seasons,
Oh
which
my
is
gosh.
amazing. Yeah. Are we having another Chris Davis redux?
24/7, but that was a
Yeah.
250.
But anyway, but like that's the thing. Like he's first base and third base eligible across every platform, which I'm a big proponent of position versatility. It helps you out, and then you can start to fold in kind of guys who add positions elsewhere as the season goes along. But he's absolutely a guy who, as my first baseman in the 11th round, give me that all day. A 250 bat with 30 homers and will hit at the top in the heart of a lineup. Yeah, that's easy. That's printing money.
Yeah, it's Jake Berger, who had a process plus by the end at 140. But the first 3 months, it was rough. And then won the IL, and feels like he was hurt, and or something was going on. And then all of a sudden, he returned back to normal in the second half and was absolutely crushing it. I hope that he does get a better team around him, because there is something to be said about those counting stats, that you can't have too many guys that only give you 68 runs and 76 RBI. Even if it does come with those 29 home runs, it's you can't have too much of that, because you are going to be behind if that's what your team is
It's
filled
hard to
with.
make that up. Yep.
Right. 12th round is Tyler O'Neill, who was absolutely a reclamation project this year in Boston. Is one of those things that we wanted him out of St. Louis for ages, and going to the Red Sox, it felt like the thing to do. And as I ignore the rattle, oh gosh, the rattle of your space bar, Kyle. I don't know how you live with that. The definition of what makes a good keyboard to me is how good the space bar sounds. And we got to
Confirmed.
fix this. We'll figure this out. But
That's your next web
talk to
series.
me.
Is you just go through Pitcherless staffers, and it's pimp my keyboard. You just go through.
If
You
someone
you
wants to
you
buy a
help them
keyboard
fund
off of
themselves.
me, I am selling pretty much my entire collection. And Tyler O'Neill, though, he's now on
Before
the
I
Red Sox, had a great
derailed you.
year. Lots of power, few contact, little contact. But you're a believer here for next year as well.
Yeah, so I mentioned before that Teoscar Hernandez had a 95th percentile barrel rate, around 14.2%. Well, Tyler O'Neill is 98th percentile at almost 17% barrel rate. Like, when the guy is making contact, he's hitting it hard and at launch angles that are conducive to that kind of power. And you can see it in his Process Plus chart the whole season. Power never in doubt. Sea of green. The contact is again a little suspect, probably a lot suspect, which makes sense for a guy who's got, he ran a 33% strikeout rate last year, which is rough, but the year before that 25, the year before that 27. So this is another one of those things of like, when you fold in the broader context of a player, that I believe the power gains are likelier to stick than the contact woes are. And so this is a guy who seems like he's like an undervalued bounce back that, like, yeah, last year was a reclamation project and he hit 30 homers in only 113 games, but it still feels like people are out on him. And again, he's another free agent, so that kind of might be why a lot of people might be talking themselves into like, oh well, it's Fenway. Fenway did it. Fenway did it. But like, nah, like the underlying stuff, our hitter stats have no idea what park it occurs in. It's completely park neutral. So it's saying this dude hits the ball really hard. And if he's in a park like Boston, it's going to be even better for him, but he can still succeed even in a lesser hitter's park.
I'm going to go back to old school stats for a second. I know this is kind of crazy. In 2021, you might remember Tyler O'Neill had that breakout year, and it was insanely good, and it was wonderful. He had a 35% ground ball rate. He had a 43% before then. 2022, that was a 44%. 2023, it was a 43%. 2024, it was back to a 35%, 10th percentile ground ball rate, while his fly ball rate jumped up to 93rd percentile. We're going from 36% to 44% in 2024 for Tyler O'Neill. And that's why the home run to fly ball rates, I mean, I think the whole thing really exploded. 28% home run to fly ball rate in 2021, 28% in 2024. Between that 18% and 15%, he was clearly going for home runs in power,
Yep.
and it worked.
Elevate and
This is
celebrate,
certainly
baby.
an approach change. It's a process change of decisions of what he's swinging at. He's absolutely is not good at making contact. His Z contact, that is Tyler O'Neill's, is 76%. That is 7th percentile. Shout out Justin Mason for Z contact. But it worked, and now he's a free agent. And you got to think he's going to try and do that same approach again. But then again, he didn't after 2021. So I hope he does. I mean, he's got to, right? Like, come on.
I hope he does. I mean, like, this seems he now has 2 years of doing this specific approach, like you said, and it paid off handsomely. And then he
Both.
got away
Every
from it.
3 years. Is this like a Blake Snell thing every 3 years or something?
God, I hope
Okay.
not. I drafted him,
No.
but no. But it seems like even one of the things that's actually most exciting to me is you mentioned that 2021 year, which was great. He did have a over 30K rate, but he had a 7% walk rate. And something that looks like one of the big changes he made after that year was bumping his walk rate up. More decisions, better decisions, taking smarter pitches. And so, like you said, he's back this year with 30 homer power, still striking out a bunch, but now he's also walking 11% of the time. So his floor, at least from an on-base standpoint, is much higher than it was in 2021. Sure, he's not stealing the bags he was then, but this is a much more well-rounded, higher floor hitter. than he was then, while still having kind of that immense pop that he showed this year.
Yeah, the new Joey Gallo here, Tyler O'Neill for 3 true outcomes. We have 2 pitchers, round 13 and 14, and we're going to talk about them after this break. So it's Yusei Kikuchi is the first one, and Nick Pivetta the second one. I agree with the first one. Big fan of Kikuchi. All the changes, all that kind of stuff. I think a lot of people have heard us talk about Yusei Kikuchi a bit. Long story short, was trying to find his changeup early on, didn't have it. Lost his slider for a bit. Finally figured out his fastball location. Then got traded to the Astros. They tried to throw his changeup initially, worked one start, left him after that. Then he went just pure four-seamer and slider and was in a groove with it, and it was great. PLV loves Kikuchi. It's a very flat four-seamer. Top of the zone. Yep. Did it better, I think, this year than usual with the four-seamer upstairs. And really, you're just fine with Kikuchi being 2-pitch. Just overall, the volatility of the year is a little worrisome with Kikuchi, but it seems like you're sold.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's universally kind of a pitch modeling darling. He, like you said, he's, top 15 starter by PLV. I know, speaking to other people and especially talking to Max Bay, who, was a Dodgers employee, or not a Dodgers. He is a Dodgers employee. He was an Astros employee before this year, so he had nothing to do with Kikuchi. But like Pitching Plus, Stuff Plus really loves him. Pitching Bot Stuff, like all of that, like along with PLV, I already feel very confident in PLV. But when I see that is like universal acclaim, I have even more confidence buying in. And like the irony to me is, like you said, like he made that pitch mix change when he went to the Astros, and he dropped his curveball. Well, his curveball was PLV's favorite pitch.
Yeah, it's so funny because I've heard a lot of things about like, oh, the WOBA on it wasn't good. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, do not ever come at me with batted ball results on a singular pitch to tell me how good or bad it is. Do not say he allowed a slugging on it or a WOBA on it. Do not look at the results, because they throw so many pitches that don't actually end up as a batted ball. Okay? Or like you look at they utilize it as a 2-strike pitch only. So of course it's going to be a super low batting average allowed because it's out of the zone. It would only be a strikeout, and they won't use it for ball 4. Don't do that. That's all. I don't know who you are, but I see you out there.
33% CSW on the curveball. So like he can absolutely throw it for strikes. One of the things, kind of what you're saying, count is so vital for if you're trying to do this like high level, like, oh, well, the pitch had this WOBA. Well, if he's not throwing it in 2 strike counts, he's not going to get strikeouts, which will lower the WOBA. So it gets artificially inflated. And his curveball, he threw 65% of the time in early counts. So very often, very like less than average in 2 strike counts. So this is a pitch that is kind of standing on its own merits. It doesn't get maybe that quote unquote like artificial boost to that WOBA value that you'll see from being a strikeout pitch. So like it had a high, honestly, it had a 49th percentile WOBA. That's really fine for a pitch that is not used as a strikeout pitch. That's a curveball. Like that's great. Like I'm happy to see that as like a reclamation project pitch. And then you saw the success at the end of the year with just the 4-seamer and slider. Like this is a guy who, the projection, the V1 of the projections had him top 10. Like it just really bought in. I'm going to say version 2 is going to come down just a little bit, but it's still very projectable, very projection friendly. I love Yusei Kikuchi. I'm drafting him everywhere.
Yeah, and he loves you too. He is a rare mix of extension. That's about 7 feet, 6.9. You have IVB over 15. It's not great. It's 15.2, but at least it's over. And you have absurdly good flat attack angle, 1.6 height adjusted VAA.
Mm-hmm.
You normally get some compromise, but to see 87th percentile, 67th, and 97th between them is very rare. And it just really amplifies the fact that if Yusei Kikuchi can essentially be upstairs a lot, which, by the way, before 2023, Kikuchi was well underneath 40% high lock, and now he's at 45, which is 23rd percentile. You can be better. Be so much better. but whatever.
Gotta up those numbers. Those are rookie
Gotta
numbers.
whisper that one in there. You can be better, buddy. Yeah, it's a rare thing. And actually, I should say extension went up a little bit to 7 in this past year, and IVB went up to 16 firm, which is great. Also, I should mention it's 95, 96 as opposed to just 95 with that fastball for Kikuchi. So I'm excited about it. I hope he does really well. I will acknowledge that he is a guy that goes in and out of rhythm, and it can be very frustrating. It's why the trade deadline, the Astro fans were like, what? He has such a high ERA. This is ridiculous. Why did we just trade for him? And then he was amazing. So good stuff there. But Nick Pivetta is an interesting one because I remember having a conversation with a few people about why does Nick Pivetta have reverse splits on his four-seamer? And the answer being that the arm angle between the throwing the sweeper and the four-seamer is obvious enough that batters can pick up which pitch is coming far easier than Pivetta throwing four-seamer and curveball as a lefty. And it has made me kind of tweak my thoughts about that kind of arsenal of being a sweeper guy where you really need to come low and across to think of the curveball, but then you got to tilt your arm 90 degrees essentially to throw it on the side of the ball to get it. And then you throw in the really great research I've been seeing, I believe from Max Bay and others, of showcasing expected movement based on arm slot. And Pavetta's, despite being absurdly good in IVB, is like kind of expected and almost dead zone in a way. Does that make you afraid? I mean, this is the 14th round. You passed on Shane Boz, Gavin Williams, Yu Darvish, a few others, Ronel Blanco, but you decided to go for Pivetta instead. Talk to me about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, you're absolutely right, especially once MLB released kind of the arm angle data, we started to get a lot more specific and accurate measures of how guys are throwing, because it's always been one of the kind of understandings about pitching that hasn't been quite quantified yet, was if a guy throws over the top, he can get more vert just because he can throw that pure backspin just with his wrist. And so it's kind of easier for him to throw vert versus if the same pitcher does the same kind of wrist, finger action, all that stuff from a sidearm slot, that's going to get arm side break. It's going to go pure sideways or even like kind of almost sinkery up and to the right. And so he's a killer and stuff. That it looks really good that it's almost 20%, or sorry, it's 19 inches of IVB, which is 98th percentile. It's elite. One of the things you'll see that plays into that is it has a very low, basically zero height adjusted vertical approach angle, which stems from that knows the path from where the pitch is released to where the pitch ends up and how flat that path is. And so it knows that, well, if he's releasing really high and it's getting that much break, it's not like it comes in, it's not as impressive. Like it's not quite as steep of a pitch as you would expect given the movement profile. And so that's a really interesting thing to me, that we do have some semblance of work toward that in prior PLV, but going forward, we're going to have better arm angle estimates, and movement deviation from your arm angle is definitely a component, absolutely in our stuff model, but I'm folding it into kind of our PLV update this season so that you can kind of figure these things out of, yeah, he gets crazy vert, but he's so over the top that batters expect it there. Like that's not nearly as impressive as like maybe 3 inches less, but from a 3/4 arm slot, like that's actually like the pitcher is doing more IVB, which is kind of funny when you think that like, oh, well, IVB is like in a vacuum, but now it's also in an arm vacuum once you adjust for that. So
gotta love those arm vacuums, everyone. It's Inspector Gadget just sticking it in and then cleaning up the rug.
Exactly. But I still believe a lot in Nick Pivetta. I mean, 113 whip this year, 112 whip last year. The guy has very good control, 6% walk rate. I stand by. He got batted around a little bit. He's in Boston, so it's gonna happen more often than you'd like to see from your starting pitcher. But I tend to fade outliery kind of home run per 9 measures, which is what he got really like. He got hit around a 173 homer per 9.
Yeah,
that's terrible. The rest of his career, he's never been above like 1.5 in a full season of starting.
Mhm.
And
Still,
like
yeah, not great.
it's still
It's always
high,
been the thing
but
with
like
Pavetta, which explains the whole fastball thing, especially if he's throwing upstairs. But I've
yep.
got good news for you, Kyle. Pavetta is a free agent, and he
That's
doesn't have
awesome.
to be in Fenway anymore. So maybe a team does get him that's a pitcher-friendly park. Might actually be a really good fit for Kansas City. And that would be interesting. There was another pitcher the other day that I think I was just talking last night. That would be a really good fit for who was it on this? Nope, I got nothing. I don't know who,
I'm
but
just finding out.
oh,
Apparently, my team is also sponsored by Scott Boras with the number
Nick
of free agents
Martinez.
that I have on it.
Nick Martinez was the guy. That's the
There
perfect
you go.
one. Oh man, link up with Lugo and Waka. Yeah, that was on the Wins Above Fantasy podcast that we did yesterday. But that's Nick Pivetta for you guys. I don't think I'll go after it because I do believe that he is home run prone, and I don't like that approach with the sweeper and the four seamer. I think that is something that's just going to stick around. When he
Yeah.
had the cutter working too, that actually made more sense to me against right-handers. As for a cutter, you don't have to make it as obvious with your arm angle. But he's just one of those guys that's going to bother you, and he goes and runs, and he's a hipster, headache-inducing pitcher, stifling the entire roster. I'd rather take a chance on Gavin Williams, Shane Baz, Zach Eflin being a little bit safer and just knowing, hey, that's value, and I know I'm going to get that. Renel Blanco, I trust more. A fair number of these arms where I feel like Pivetta, it would be surprising to me if he really took another step forward. But that's just me. Camilo Duvall and Jason Foley follow. You didn't have a closer yet.
Nope.
And did the projections like these guys more, or is this just be like, I need to get two closers, here they are?
No, it was the best roster lift given players available.
Yes.
And I'm always aware of what the strengths and weaknesses of a projection system is. I am algorithmically generating who's closing for what teams. And so because Doval closed a lot for the Giants, he got a decent amount of share, even though Ryan Walker finished the season. I still think that Doval is a really, really talented closer. I think he could potentially win that job back, or I've seen kind of some murmurings that maybe he'll be traded, that he could be a better fit for a different team somewhere else. And if that's the case, I'm going to be snatching up Duvall everywhere I can, because if he's got the inside line to a closing position with the pitches that he has, I'm all about it.
Yeah. And then with Jason Foley, he throws super hard.
Yeah.
I remember opening day being like, what? This guy? Oh yeah, this guy's dope. Okay, let's go pick him up now. That was a pretty fun moment for Foley. And yeah, I mean, when it comes to closers in these mock drafts, I think this is the worst element of us doing this, because it's all going to change massively by
Yep.
March for so many reasons. I think in general, you can find something in by the 15th, 16th round. My whole thought process is generally around 12, 13, 14 is when you have to go after, and you can usually get two good ones. But it totally depends on the league and everything. 17th round has arrived, and we are going to go for Carlos Correa. Now, this deal I was looking at earlier on the stream is really going to be hampering Minnesota. I mean, he's, oh my gosh, 30 plus million for years to come. And you're a believer, though, in the 17th round, even though you already have a shortstop, you don't really need this one. This must have been Peel about saying, no, we got to do this.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's like middle infielder, backup. If for whatever reason something happens, he's one of the better options that I have just to kind of flesh out the hitters in my lineup. I think he's injured a lot, so like one of the other kind of benefits of that is that I can stash him more often. That for all that his injuries may be a headache, it actually does help in roster construction. It's kind of like playing with a free lineup spot, whether that's picking a hot starter to go that week, whether it's taking a flyer on a call up. That it does afford you some roster flexibility while still having what I believe is an extremely high floor batter there. And so I think that helps with my roster versatility, especially as we'll get to a little bit later, but Abrams and Otani were my primary source of steals. And so if I end up having a glut of steals, I could probably trade them off for, value later. That steals, even in with the new bags and the new rules, still can be pretty hard to come by, especially it's hard to get them on the wire rather than in the draft. And so Correa makes me comfortable with Abrams maybe as a chip later on. None of this goes into the projections. This is me kind of rationalizing it, but Correa is like the projections love Correa just because he's a really good hitter. He's
Yeah.
great. The issue is always when he's healthy, but when he's healthy, he's an extremely sound hitter who's going to be hitting in a fun Twins lineup. So I like it a lot.
Yeah, it is something to consider of per plate appearance in a 12-teamer where you have IL spots and you might as well go for the quality per at bat, per plate appearance, I should say, because yeah, that means that you just move on from them and that's okay, and you have something replaceable. It's always with these high quality players where the question is volume, always go for it because that plus the replacement on the wire is generally far better than just settling for meh. You can do better, everyone. Always just try and consolidate top talent in these leagues. It's always a good idea. We have 6 more to talk about, and we're gonna go through that at the end of PL Bots draft with Kyle Bland after this break. So we have one more hitter here, Michael Toglia, and really he's I think the exciting guy in Colorado. Maybe it's Doyle, of course, as well, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I just
Doyle
feel
went
like there's always some like
fourth round.
there's always some big bats that is just like, oh, okay, cool. Here's the power guy that takes advantage, of course, and that feels like Toglia.
Yeah, I mean that's backed up entirely by the metrics. That's why I picked him. That it's kind of a burger insurance policy, if you will. That if that doesn't work out if he doesn't work out at first base for me, then I have maybe a discount version of him, but he's a guy who plays in cores that I can, maybe I stream the starts, whatever. Another thing of like, do they bench Otani when he pitches? Like, how is this all going to shape out? Like, retroactively justifying why I picked here for the POV projections, because the projections love him. They see him as an upper 20s bat, big hole in contact ability, but when you have power like that, that'll play in cores. You can really put up a lot of homers in a hurry there. So it was a really good value there. And I'd have him over Nolan Jones was picked right before him, and give me Toglia over Jones all day.
Yeah. We're going to move to the 19th round. It's the Pasta Pirate himself, Spencer Arrighetti. And my quick take here is that Arrighetti is not quite a command guy as I want him to be, but he does have a decently large array of options in his secondaries. And when his fastball is able to actually find enough strikes, things can go pretty well for him. It does give me some hesitancy because Arrighetti is hard to trust for a long period of time. But if he's able to build that sustainability, there are enough there are enough tools in this for him to where I believe he had 2 pitches over a 20% swinging strike rate last year in his secondaries and a 4-seamer that is very flat. PLV clearly likes the Pasta Pirate Spencer Arrighetti.
Yeah, he was a top 40 pitcher starter by PLV last year. I mean, even like those underlines are really good. Our internal kind of beta PLV stuff model that'll be coming out later this offseason loves everything that isn't his fastball. But even then, his fastball still grades as a better than average fastball.
I mean,
so like
it's a 7.2 extension with a 1.6 VAA and 94 miles per hour.
Yeah.
It is like a Wheeler-esque version of if you lean on extension and flat angle, that's generally good at 94.
Exactly. And it's like, that's the thing is like, it's kind of dead zone-y movement, but like he just powers through it in terms of extension and that velo. So
yeah.
I think that's why, it's still a plus 4-seam, even if it's like a lesser overall offering when you're looking at other pitch types. And I mean, that goes through, we talked about PLV, we've talked about our stuff model, but 27% strikeout rate. like the results also back up that the dude can get strikeouts. Yes, it does come with a 10.3% walk rate, which is bad. That's like
Yeah.
really bad. But that's kind of the flip side of it. Like you said, like this is in the 19th round. He's going to be my second to last starter. You're always preaching burn and churn once you get past like
Oh,
4
yeah.
or 5 rocks. Like this is absolutely a guy where I can see like, okay, did he level up his command? Did he take a step? Is he still striking out the world? Great, then I'll hang on to it. Or oh god, he's still putting up double digit walk rates. Yeah, the whip is still 1.4. The ERA is still upper fours. Like, yeah, okay, I can cut bait on this pretty easily, but like that strikeout and stuff upside is extremely tantalizing.
Right. So you should know that everybody listening, that a 290 ERA and a 115 whip is what happened in his final 11 games of the season. And that does include a relief appearance on the Friday before the end of the season, 2.1 innings there, with a
3 walks.
31% K rate and 8% walk rate. That's a lot better. He had really really 2 games back to back of 7 walks, and that ruined it. But one of those came with 11 strikeouts, and it was 4 walks and 2 hits and 7.2 innings against the Phillies. So who cares? There was also that game in Cincinnati that you might remember where he allowed 9 runs, and then it was corrected that it was an error by the shortstop Pena that spared him 6 more unearned runs. Now, that was a ridiculous inning. He had 8 base runners in 0.2 innings, including that error. It was terrible. It was just not good. It went all south for him. He was gassed. All of this stuff, 38 pitches in that inning. But I really, save for that stuff, like he was just on point. And I want to believe that's who he is now. I so badly do, but I can't. I want to say yes, but I don't know. It's still that four seamer does get hit hard, 42% ICR.
Yep.
The cutter isn't really becoming the pitch I want it to be, 42% ICR for that too in that stretch. And the real winners were the curveball and the sweeper, but they were inconsistent. The curveball under a 60% strike rate, the sweeper under a 60% strike rate. And that was during the successful time. You think, oh, you can either think 2 ways. One, well, then he's still great. It doesn't matter because he had those flaws and he succeeded. Or B, oh, he got away with that and it worked out in his way. I'm going to say the latter because it didn't work out for him before it. And it wasn't to me as if he just vastly changed. I think throwing a lot more strikes with the sinker and the four seamer and the cutter gave him an opportunity to succeed in this way. But I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. So I'm still questioning it. I would feel a lot better if he had this overwhelming, like, no. He just throws this cutter and like he's totally fine. Just do that more kind of pitch. But you're right. It is a time to take a chance on this. I think this is pretty much right where I have him ranked in my rankings anyway. So we'll
Here's
see. It's going to be tough to make the decision is my problem with it.
My vibes-based comp for Arrighetti is
Yes.
another pitcher who, when he was 24 years old, had a 10% walk rate with killer stuff, and it is Blake Snell.
I knew you were going to say Blake Snell.
Yeah, Blake Snell.
Yeah.
Like you just see, like,
wait.
This is poor man's Blake Snell. Trust me, I'm not saying Spencer Arrighetti is Blake Snell.
Spencer Arrighetti does not nibble like Blake Snell does.
But neither did
Blake Snell's like, no. Okay,
but that's the thing.
The changeup is so filthy for Blake Snell as a lefty. A lefty with a filthy changeup is like the way to make things work. And Arrighetti doesn't have that equivalent with a slider. He doesn't. The curveball also became a thing this year and was the money pitch for Snell. When it comes to Snell's success, like it's the secondaries being just so ridiculously good. And then also with a fastball that you does not make mistakes with. And Arrighetti, that's not Arrighetti. Stop. Don't do this. Also, huge shout out to Carlos Marcano chilling in the live YouTube channel. Carlos, oh man, you Nick and Kyle, #1 fan. Also Toglia, #1 fan. We are a #1 fan of you. Keep doing fantastic stuff. Former Pitcher List alum. He is a Pitcher List alum, former staff writer. doing wonderful things now. Baseball Prospectus. It's so cool what you're doing,
Yeah,
Carlos,
I was
and
just
great to
we were talking about it
great
in
to
our
have you.
meeting today. Carlos he did a bunch of fantasy 101 articles. He
That's
translated
right.
into Spanish, and it was so cool. And I completely forgot we have that. And I'm definitely going to be personally sending more of them out next year when things get started up, because that's such an awesome resource and
Yeah,
yeah, just really cool.
that's right, Carlos. We still talk about you in our daily stand up. That you translate our fantasy 101 articles into Spanish. It was so cool. All right, we're gonna move on to Jeff Hoffman, who honestly I love this pick. Like I was kind of upset that I didn't go after. I saw him. I was like, oh, there it is, because he's trying to be a starter next year, and Hoffman looked pretty dang good as a reliever. It's hard to guess if a reliever is going to hang on to their velocity gains. Traditionally, we say no. There are rare exceptions. Crochet, Renato Lopez. I mean, Renato Lopez not as much, but still enough. And Hoffman, fastball, slider, both great. This is a nice, fun upside play of saying, look, if he becomes a starter, awesome. And if he doesn't, I can just drop here in the 20th round.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is another one of those picks that we knew he'd be a free agent, but I think the news of he might try to start trickled out kind of as
Yeah.
the offseason went on. So I just picked him as a reliever. I mean, I think he's just a very
Ha!
good relief pitcher. And I mean, that's also how the POV projections have him, because that's what he was a relief pitcher. But this turned out to be like a very fortuitous pick because with relievers, the saying is always you draft skills, not roles. And that's what I did here. And now, not only do I think if he signs somewhere, he could be their closer pretty plausibly because his stuff is so good, but if he becomes a starter, I think he could also be a pretty lights out starter. I don't think he'll have. I mean, we've seen it with guys like Renato Lopez, Garrett Crochet. I'm not saying that he's going to be those guys, but there is a lot more of an avenue for converting relievers with a repertoire into
Yeah.
starters. And Hoffman checks a lot of those boxes. Eric Samolsky talked about the benefit of having these pitches and how to add them. Our own Rick Graham at First Pitch talked about what he looks for in converting relievers to starters, and Jeff Hoffman checked all of those boxes. So very exciting.
Yeah, nice. We have 3 to go here. Victor Robles, who had an exciting year with the Mariners.
Yeah, Victor Robles, honestly, kind of one of my favorite picks of the whole draft this late.
Mm.
I mean, 21st round. He had a very good year. People think like, oh, like that's a fun story. He had 34 stolen bases in 295 plate
Oh
appearances.
my gosh. That's it's
Yeah,
over 60 in a year.
that is basically a 70 per 600 pace. It's obscene. It's amazing. He's done it. He's shown that willingness to run kind of in previous seasons as well. They've been shorter seasons, but it seems like for whatever reason, he's really found a fit in Seattle. Once he went there, his numbers took off. He looked great. And I'm here for this late round dart throw who could win me steals a ton of weeks.
Yeah. No, this is a seal of approval. I mean, the thing is, I haven't really been giving out seals of approval, guys, because it's a lot of projection stuff, and it's like I don't know how much I can do that. But I have given like Jordan Westberg one. I've given I like the Tyler O'Neill one, like the Robles one. I would say probably like Jason Foley is one. But I mean it's loose stuff in this one. All right, guys,
POV
don't
gets
hold
the
me to the
seal of
fire on
approval.
this. On the last 2 here, you waited on catcher.
Yep.
And this is always a thing we hear like either 2 phrases when it comes to catching. Oh, I always like to wait on catcher. Whatever. There's so many, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I don't want to have to worry about catcher. I just go and get one here. It seems like you're willing to wait on catcher, but was it specifically Ryan Jeffers, who I know during the year, like, oh, Jeffers is in the lineup. You got to be careful against Minnesota, or he's not in the lineup. You can pitch against Minnesota. Is that your thought on Ryan Jeffers? You clearly like the guy.
I think Jeffers is the best last catcher. I'll say. Like I'm very comfortable getting him if I'm drafting catchers last, like I did here. So speaking of drafting from projections versus drafting from personal opinion, what I absolutely should have done and wanted to do and would have done was JT Realmuto or Wilson Contreras. Both of them, like I definitely have above Jeffers, but Robles was standing out as
Yeah, no,
such
you have to
a category winner. And like Rio Muto's great. Wilson Contreras is great. This late in the draft, too, I'm kind of a proponent of you're probably going to be churning this catcher anyway. There aren't a lot of like league winning catchers that are going to be found here, but so it's probably easier to get upside off the wire. And especially with a guy like Jeffers, who I talked about a little bit with Carlos Correa, that if he gets injured, if he gets platooned, whatever, that makes your decisions for you. Like you don't have to get bogged up. I know you talked about this with Snell of like, you get this headache of like, what do I do? Like, he's starting most games. And like with Jeffers is like, is he starting? Great. I'll keep him on my roster. Is he not? All right, bang, straight to the waiver wire. What's the next best pick? And so like it makes the decision process super easy.
That's such a big thing. I talk about that one a lot. I love that you're on the same page about it. I am not on the same page on your last pick, which might sound shocking considering he's hanging out right over here. And that is Reed Detmers. Because Reed Detmers for 3 straight years has done the same magic act of having this ridiculous spring in March. Like, oh, the slider's here. It's here. And then in season, it goes away by June 1st. Now, this past year was a little different as he increased IVB on his 4-seamer. It was a better fastball, and still it all fell apart after like 5 starts. I am not falling for this again. I won't be able to believe it if he does do well in the beginning. I just can't. I also want to mention that the curve and the change are very in and outs. The slider all year doesn't happen. And the fastball came way back down to earth later on the season. So what the heck is this, Kyle Bland? Why am I staring at Reed Detmers right now?
I'm ready to be hurt again. That's what it comes down to with Reed Detmers of like literally basically Mr. Irrelevant for my draft. Last round pick, huge dart throw. He's a guy who our stuff model likes him a lot. It likes the slider. It likes the fastball. It's fine on the curveball and the changeup. So 2 good stuff pitches, 2 fine stuff pitches in the 23rd round at the back end of my personal fantasy rotation that, you know, I joked about Arrighetti being a poor man's Snell, but Detmers is really a poor man's Arrighetti, which probably says a lot.
Well, at least you guys read the notes. And yes, that was my team name for 2023, the PL Legacy League 100%. But Kyle, that is your draft. I can't thank you enough for being here. Everybody listening, if you're curious about getting PL Pro, you can sign up with promo code podcast to get 10% off yearly for that. That is, I believe, 2 months off. I think that's 2 months off the price. So it's pretty fantastic. But anyway, Kyle, what stuff can we expect from PLV coming soon? And also, of course, how would you rate this draft? Do you feel comfortable with it? Do you feel like you still need to put your thumb on the scale a little bit? It's scale 1 to 23. How do you feel about the draft?
I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 14. I feel pretty good. Definitely over average. I think there were some places that I left a little bit of value on the table, either with personal preference or just deciding between 2 projections players and maybe picking one that later on in the draft was like, I should have, you always do that. You go back a little bit if this would have worked in the exact same order, but I swapped another person, that kind of thing. But I feel really good about it. I think there's a lot of balance. I would love to feel more confident in my closers, but it's November. Anything can happen even before game start, and then definitely once game start.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, definitely. I've got just some stud starters that I just love so much. I've got hitting. I've got all 5 categories of hitting locked down. I really like it. I think it'd be pretty competitive in this league. Projections obviously favor it. It's the number 1 by projections because I had the cheat sheet going into it. But yeah, I this was super fun. A lot of, fittingly, a lot of really sharp people in the draft room. But yeah, that's the draft. And then what do we have on the docket? We've got, as Nick said, coming out imminently is we have our draft assistant tool. So that'll help you do things like this, use PLV projections to win your drafts. We're going to get that out for all of you early drafters. We're going to get our hitter stats this offseason. They're coming online on our player pages. So that'll be really sick. So you can just one-stop shop and look and see all the skills that they have on our player pages. We're going to be onboarding stuff and location models. Super exciting.
Yes.
Like Nick said, for PO Pro members, we've already trickled them in a little bit in some of our apps, some breadcrumbs here and there, but these are going to be full fat pitch level models that will be all the way back through 2020. Same thing we have with PLV. So that's really exciting. Some of the things that we have in the docket, player cards, so you can see at a glance how'd that guy do yesterday, how that hitter, pitcher, how's he doing the season, all that good stuff. So so you can see, really analyze quickly, easily how a guy did, and then just so many cool things. I'm going to be doing a streamer comparison with Nick, as Nick
Oh
said,
man.
and I'm happy to remind him PLBot won the streaming wars
PLBot
this year.
won. You had some
So
ridiculous picks, and I just go, you had Jacob Junis 3 times in a row for those 3 good starts, and I will never forget that.
yeah,
I don't know how that one
opponent
worked. 5
matters.
innings
Opponent
each time.
matters.
Oh my gosh. That was
W.
ridiculous.
But yeah, so I'm gonna to try and see like what were some of the insights I could glean from that. What were some of the strengths and weaknesses of kind of both of our approaches, and how much did the streamers benefit a team? What was our season long stats? So I think that should be kind of pretty fun. And yeah, updating the projections, always getting new stuff, new data, new ideas, all
It's
off season.
unbelievable.
So keep paying attention. I'm going to be putting out updates all the time. Very exciting stuff.
Yeah, and I do want to remind everyone that our live draft assistant tool that we had last year, the Google Sheets, is going to be updated with 2025 projections this week. However, we are also working on an updated version of that I'll have more to talk about at a later date. But really, really excited about that project. But yeah, already, I mean, I used that all of last year and it was phenomenal. I'm super excited to have PLV projections again guide me to the light for a lot of these hitters that I don't want to have to deal with. I just don't. But that's going to do it for this episode of On the Corner. Huge thanks to Kyle Bland for coming on, Director of Analytics here at PitcherList, showcasing PLBot and our projections for 2025. Obviously, give him a follow at Bland Analytics, both on Blue Sky and on Twitter. And my name is Nick Pollock. And may your BABIPs be low and your strikeouts high. We'll see you guys. Bye-bye.